Hello and welcome back to Take This TV, the television book club podcast, where each week we watch an episode or two of our favorite shows and we talk about them with our friends in the fandom. Guess who that is? It's you. Hello. I'm Carmen and I'm joined by the wonderful Kimberly Woods. Hello.
Hey, hot potatoes.
This season we're watching Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Which episode are we talking about today?
Today we're on episode 5, and it's called Do You Want Kids? John and Jane spend summer in Lake Como, driving cars, dodging criminals, and chasing slippery Toby, whose crimes endanger them. Caring for this baby man makes them ponder parenthood. I love this description.
That's a very accurate description.
Yeah. The Amazon blurb is on point for this episode.
What did you think of this episode?
It was pretty hilarious. I loved seeing their banter as, you know, the married spy couple come into play here, where they're in the car and, you know, they're shooting out of the car and they're like, "Nice one, babe. Thanks, babe."
Yeah,
I
cute.
That was really cute.
I did think, like, when they first are snatching up Toby, they take their masks off. After they put the hood on him, they take their masks off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these guys are so bad at this.
It's so funny. And then when he's in the car and he's like complaining, you know, the baby man's complaining about, you know, I'm going to have a heart attack, and he wants his hood off. And, you know, they have the child locks on the door and he can't get off. Jane's like, okay, well, let me take your hood off. And then it's like, okay, well, yeah, I guess they don't really care about them seeing, you know.
He sees your faces,
yeah. Also, her explanation to him, like, as they're, like, kidnapping him, where she's like, we're going to help you. We're here to help. And I'm like, how is she? Yeah, we promise. And I'm like, okay, what do they even know about this mission? Like, they're just told to take him to the safe house.
I was expecting that to backfire on them at some point. I'm like, whoops, you shouldn't have done that.
Yep. But no, it didn't. So that was a pretty funny element of this episode. Like, that really didn't seem to come into play for them or their mission there.
Yeah. I also love when they're driving and John's like, oh, you know, this is nice. And they're talking about, like, settling down and getting a house together. And meanwhile, Toby's just in the back seat, kidnapped. I'm like, wow, it's very surreal, but it also is just like very on point for them of just like the kind of people that they are.
Yeah. I also love that we're in Italy, because I feel like we've gotten the, you know, whole ski chalet spy story and the high society art event spy story. And it's like, of course, now we're in the Italian landscape, you know. So it was very fun to see them driving through crashing through the wedding and, you know.
Oh my
What did you think about them running up the stairs with all the people after them and Toby's like hyperventilating like a little baby man?
I was cracking up. I mean, I love Ron Perlman and he's so great in this episode. And I also love that we sort of get their... It is very much like a weird family dynamic of John and Jane being like parents, and then Toby being like their adult baby man kid. And so like seeing John trying to like politely honk at people to get past the wedding, and then Jane just shooting in the air to get people to move, and her being more gentle with Toby and John being more abrasive. I thought it was a really fun dynamic over the course of the episode just to see how their different styles, and especially when Toby keeps saying that he's so tired and he doesn't want to climb over the rail, and then John just pushes him off the building.
So funny. That was one of my favorite moments too. They're just like, boop. There you go, down you go. I thought it was really interesting too, because in this episode we find out, you know, like John is really the one who wants kids, but Jane here seems to be more maternal towards Toby.
She does.
And so it's like, but she doesn't want kids. So it's an interesting dynamic to see at play.
Yeah. They definitely like swap roles quite a bit over the course of the episode. And when they get to the safe house that they're supposed to take Toby to, is compromised. And there are people there who start shooting at them. And my first thought was like, ooh, is HiHi setting them up? Because I was like, are these people other Smiths? Was my first thought. But we never really find out. It's just like these people are chasing them. And then Toby does make it known that, like, it could be anybody. I have a lot of enemies. So
yeah, and I kept thinking, like, my God, how many people does he have after him? Because it's like, you know, you're saying, first it was the safe house, then it was like people popping up out of everywhere, like in these buildings on the streets in Italy. Yeah. Also, can we talk about, I was worried when they hopped on the boat and she was like, you know, I'm pregnant or whatever. And they were like trying to escape. They didn't get shot out there. I was like, oh my God, like somehow they managed to like throw them off. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess hiding in plain sight is the best way to escape. Toby was kind of ducking down a bit in the boat, but I'm like, do they not know what John and Jane look like? 'Cause, I mean, I guess they shot most of the people who were chasing them, but still, I was definitely thinking that they would get shot at while they were on the boat, or that the family would get shot at least. When they were trying to get on the boat, and then like they're trying to convince the people to help them, I was like, oh my gosh, because Toby was been like he had been like kind of reserved for the most part, but I was like, what kind of person would have all these people after them? And so I thought that he was going to Toby was going to kill the family in that moment. And I was like, uh-oh. But thankfully that didn't happen.
Once they get across the lake to this other house, and then suddenly John knows the code, and Jen's like, what? How do you know the code of this place? And then hilariously we find out that John has bought this house during their time here, like sight unseen. Like went to the market to pick up some eggs and milk or something, and then ended up seeing some sort of property like catalog or something, picture, and decided, yeah, I'm gonna buy that place. But like, what is the situation with it anyway? Because it still has the owner's stuff in it.
And there's dynamite in there.
Yeah, it's like, okay, who did this belong to?
Right.
So I thought that was pretty hilarious. Jane's pretty taken aback by it. Like, really? This is like a big decision that you didn't discuss with me. But he just seems to take it in stride. Like, yeah, it's a nice surprise.
Right. He thought it would be a nice surprise for Jane. I love in that moment, too, where they're kind of having this conversation. Toby comes over and he's like, as somebody with a lot of money, you should never buy a house without seeing it. And just kind of like lectures John a little bit.
Oh my gosh. Another hilarious moment that I love in this whole baby man fun that they have in this episode is when they're trying to get Ron Perlman's character Toby to take the medicine, and he doesn't want to take the medicine because he's like feeling sick, and then John's like, I'll give you a cigarette. And he's like, okay.
That was hilarious.
It was so funny.
It was very much like trying to get a kid to take their medicine. It's like you promise them a cookie, but in this case, the cookie's a cigarette. Yeah.
And then in true John fashion, he doesn't give him a cigarette. He's like, I was lying about the cigarette.
Yeah, he strings him along, and it's like, after dinner, you'll get it. But then we learn later that he was never going to give it to him.
And then at dinner, too, it's just funny because Jane's kind of enraptured by Toby's story and thinks it's charming. And John is like, oh my gosh. Like, you know, it's like listening to a 5-year-old tell this, like, you know,
dumb story.
Crazy story. Yeah, and he's like, oh.
Yeah. It was cool to kind of like see them all together and like spending a day together at the house.
Yeah, it was very cool. But then when they're going to, you know, have their little intimate moment outside, mom and dad, we know it's going to get interrupted by the child. But anyway, before it gets interrupted by baby man Toby, as they're having the sexy moment, John says, I want to put a baby in you.
And then he says, is that creepy?
Yeah.
Because Jane is kind of dirty talking to him a little bit and just trying to, like, you know, get the mood, set the mood or whatever. And John says, I want to put a baby in you. And it's just like, it totally kills the vibe because she's like, wait, what?
Yeah, it's totally a record scratch moment. Like, Oh gosh. And then Toby shows up like right after, needing something.
Yeah, he's like,
and
I think I
somebody has to
threw
go
up.
put him back.
And then Jane's like, oh, I'll go. And he's like, no, I'll put him down. you stay out here. And so just like if the kid woke up in the middle of the night and caught their parents trying to do some stuff, John goes to help Toby get back to sleep.
And
but
also
before that moment.
Yeah.
Oh,
Go
I was
ahead,
just going to
Carmen.
say that John had a cigarette the whole time because he lied to Toby and told him he doesn't have any. But he really had one the whole time. He just didn't want to give it to Toby. But then Jane thinks it's funny and then they smoke it. But that just shows you that John was just like being a little mischievous.
Yeah. I was going to say during this, when they're in the new house, Jane starts getting messages privately from HiHi here.
Oh, that's right.
And this is like the first time we've kind of seen this where HiHi is like checking in and she's like, should I ask John to come here? And they're like, no.
Oh,
Basically.
yeah,
And then
because
they're
HiHi's like, do you have a second to talk, Jane?
Yeah, do you have a second to talk? And and then she's like, should I bring John in? And they're like, no, it's okay. And then they say, Jane, are you happy?
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, what, with work? And they're like, with everything. What is happening here?
HiHi's making moves.
HiHi is trying to stoke some flames. I don't know. They say, we see you advancing. So they're like trying to stroke her ego here and like, I don't know, instigate stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah. Which she doesn't tell John about there, so.
She doesn't. And I do want to point out that like something we forgot to mention. When they're outside hanging out while Toby is asleep, they're having conversations and like trying to be honest with each other. And they were talking about their vows. And I think John asked Jane, what would our vows be? And she was saying something like, I would vow to not get mad at your relationship with your mother. And there's like this long beat of silence. And then John just kind of looks at Jane and says, I'd vowed never to kill you. And there's this like really long silence. And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah. And then I think she says, I like that.
Yeah, she does say that she
interesting.
likes that. Yeah. And I was like, is that romantic? I
was like, whoa.
This was before. Was this before or after he said he wants to put a baby in her? I can't remember.
Right before, kind of
Okay.
that moment before, if they're making out. Yeah, they have that intimate conversation with each other, and they
That's
say
right,
that.
because she was turned on because he was like, I'd never kill you. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I think he was like, he was asking if she would ever want to do vows, like wedding vows, like actual like a ceremony.
Yeah.
Because of the wedding that they ruined. And she was saying how vows make her uncomfortable, but she'd rather do private vows. And so they started saying these sort of vows to each other. And John also said something like, I vow to not make you feel delusional that you think your cat will live forever.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Oh, Max, the best character in the show.
Right before I vow to never kill you, which he was like being more serious about. But yeah, it was one of those moments where you're like, what? Where is he taking this? And what are they setting up here with this spy show?
Right. It was definitely a moment that I was taken aback by. I was like, wait,
I was like, oh no, I hope we're not going in that direction. Because anyway, yeah, as you know, in the original Mr. and Mrs. Smith, at some point, you know, Brad and Angelina are tasked with killing each other. So
they are.
Yep. Yep.
So HiHi is sowing dissent. And
yeah.
So HiHi tells Jane that in the morning they need to deliver Toby to a specific location, and then a seaplane will come by and pick Toby up. And she's like, how will you know once we get there? And they're like, we'll know. And it's like, wait, what? Excuse me?
Yeah. It's like, okay, I guess they got eyes and ears about. Great.
Right? Like, is GPS Find My Phone on, or like what's happening?
Yeah, it's pretty creepy. And then we get all of these assassins descending upon the home in the morning while Jane is making tea and they're getting ready to go. And she ends up blowing up the house. She uses
John's
that
new
dynamite we
house.
saw earlier. Yeah, John's new house. She's just like, boop, It's gone.
Goodbye, house. So,
what do you think? What do you think, Carmen? Is she like? I feel like she takes pride in that.
I mean, she does seem pretty satisfied by the house exploding. And then John asks, like, you blew up my house. And she's like, don't you mean our house? So I feel like she definitely took some pride in, like, poking back at John a bit that he bought this house.
Yep. So then they get to their spot. Oh, we also get this interesting thing, like you're saying, with Toby, where it's like, okay, at some point early in the episode, HiHi is like, take care of Toby. He's very important to the company. Mm-hmm. And then Toby is about to like confess his sins to John and Jane. He's like, I really feel like I need to tell you what I do. You know? And of course, they're like, we don't want to hear, or I think John says we don't want to hear it or something. But they cut away. And then he's gone. Because
Jane's like no. You know, we're like, Jane's being really empathetic and like letting him open up. And John's like, we don't need to know. Just like, shut up. Like, I don't care. Yeah. And then the seaplane comes and he's gone. So. Yeah.
And as the audience, I was like, no, tell me.
Yeah, I was like, I want to know.
I want to know the kind of people HiHi thinks are like high priority.
So after the mission, this is a jam-packed episode. After the mission, they get back home. And John has some wine, and he's like, "Hey, you know, you want some wine?" And Jane's like, "Oh, I'm not really feeling well. No, thank you." And you know, they have like a little bit of a spat, but it's not really anything. But John's just kind of annoyed that she doesn't want to share wine with him. And then HiHi is messaging Jane on the side, and Jane is talking to HiHi, and HiHi sends Jane some wine, and she drinks HiHi's wine, even though she denied wine from John.
Yeah, and then John also, in the midst of this, is suspicious because he's like, okay, you said to the boat guy that you're pregnant. You've been feeling kind of, you know, you're not drinking wine. Are you pregnant?
That's right.
Like, I feel like in the midst of this whole, like... HiHi instigating stuff, we're back to the core of the like, do you want kids? And she kind of calls him out on it too in that moment, saying he's simple-minded for wanting a family. Like, do you really want to bring kids into the middle of the
life that they have? Yeah. But then John gets triggered because he thinks that she's calling him stupid, and they have a pretty big fight about that.
Yeah. But the note on the wine bottle from HiHi says, "Well done, Jane."
And John sees it.
Yeah. And John is like, what is going on? What did you say to them? Like, are you taking credit for our missions? Are you saying it's just you? So
I love
whatever
that moment
HiHi
also,
was trying to do. Yeah.
Jane's like, oh, it's a typo.
Yeah.
Just trying to like play it off and make it seem like it's smaller than it is. It definitely like, this show does a great job of just like making, moments in a relationship feel more fantastical and like dramatic, and like it's kind of like that moment in a relationship where it's like maybe there's a friend or somebody that's a little overly familiar with one of your partners or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, that feels a little inappropriate, but
yeah.
But Jane's trying to play it off like it's nothing.
Yeah.
And then something interesting happens.
Yes.
HiHi asks Jane, would you like to replace your John?
Yeah.
And that's how
they say, we think you're ready to go up a level. Would you like to replace your John?
And it's like, oh, and we see her thinking about it. And that's where the episode ends.
Yeah. And I'm like, what? Is she really thinking about it?
I mean, because they just had this big fight.
Yeah. And also, she was trying to use HiHi almost like a therapist at one point, too, right before that. Because she says to HiHi, like, they have this argument about children. And then she goes to HiHi, and it's like, am I expected to have a child? Mm-hmm. And asks HiHi this. John wants me to. You know.
She's confiding in HiHi, yeah. So, things are not looking good for our John and Jane.
No, I don't like it, Carmen.
I don't like it either. It makes me sad.
Me too.
over the course of this episode, their relationship has taken a nosedive because it started off they're in love and they're like, oh, we should buy a house in Italy together. And then by the end of it, Jane's like, should I replace my John? I don't even know.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I don't like it. I like our John and Jane being happy and going on missions and having fun and having, fun comedy banter. But it made me a little, sad.
It did. Are you still loving the show?
I mean, I'm loving it. I'm loving the show. I'm not loving John and Jane's relationship. I'll put it that way.
That's fair.
I want them to be happy. What about you, Carmen?
I think I'm loving the show right now. I think that, I'm really curious about what's going to happen. I'm so intrigued about the mystery. Who's HiHi? What is this organization? How John and Jane seem really oblivious about, what this life actually is and what it means. And so I'm like, this is going to come back to bite them at some point.
Yeah. So. I do feel like he's very naive, just with the, what about children? Yeah. It's surprising. He doesn't see the gravity of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Sometimes that surprises me as a character. It's
he is really naive. And earlier in the episode, they're being chased, and he's like, "I have a plan," and they run across the bridge, and everybody's like, "What's your plan?" And he clearly doesn't have one. So it's like he's playing make believe, but the stakes are really high.
Yeah. Well, I hope they're able to work it out. We'll have to see.
We'll see.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. Tell us what you thought on social media. We're at Take This TV on TikTok and Instagram. Thank you for watching. Welcome to the club. And remember, it's dangerous to watch TV alone. Bye.